Persistent cross-site scripting, as other name, is stored scripting attack represent one of the three major types of cross-site scripting. The other two types of attack of these kinds are non-persistent XSS and DMS-based XSS. In general, XSS attacks are based on the victim's trust in a legitimate but vulnerable web application or website. A persistent XSS attacks is possible when a website or a server application stores user input and later serves it to the other user. An application is vulnerable if it does not validate user input before storing contents and embedding it into the HTML response pages. Attackers use vulnerable web pages to inject malicious code and have it stored on the website for the later use. The payload is automatically served to users who browses web pages and executed in their context. Thus, the victim do not need to click on a malicious attack to run the payload, like as in the case of non-persistent SS, or all that have to do is visit a vulnerable web pages. So, persistent XSS attack generally target websites like online communities and internet forums, as also known as like messages, bulletins, or discussion boards, guest books, social network platform, or unknown people's comment section that accept user generated content. An attacker, for example, posts a seemingly like attractive comment, but the comment contains a malicious script. Later, when a user views that comment, the user browser runs the script automatically. So, persistent XSS attack, more commonly known as stored, because malicious code is saved on the web server or in a database, that are considered the most dangerous types, because any visitor who views the comment becomes a unwitting victim even though he didn't do anything. The attacker doesn't need to use any tactics or tricks to deceive the user. So, this diagram assumes that the targeter has already discovered a persistent cross-site scripting vulnerability on the target web application and has a way to tricking or ensuring the victim will visit the page that containing the persistent XSS payload. Typical entry point for persistent XSS is required user supplied input to be stored on the application, because it makes it persistent and it renders within the page. So, there is the list of the some of the typical locations where persistent XSS vulnerability exists, like in message forums, in blog comments, or profile page information, or even in admin portals. Attack vectors for persistent XSS. An attacker can execute JavaScript of their choosing on the victim machine. Therefore, XSS can be used to execute a number of security risks and or to be used in combination with other web vulnerabilities to exploit a higher severity security vulnerability. Like, as an example, redirecting the browser, link placement, hooking browser means redirecting vulnerable browser to exploits. Cookie theft or the common session hijacking, key logging, using XSS to steal CSRF tokens, fake login forms, and finally the abusing HTML5. Cookie theft. The following example uses a vulnerable block comment system to inject a XSS payload on a popular page often visited by victims. The following XSS payload attempts to load an image from the attacker server with a victim cookie data within the request URL. After a request for the image has taken place, the attacker can extract the victim session identifier from the web server log files. So let me explain the cookie theft situation. So first, the attacker sends the XSS payload to the victim, which is the HTML script. Then the victim requests the page from the server. Either the attacker tricked the victim into visiting the page, or the XSS payload is on a popular page. The web server serves the page containing the XSS payload to the victim's web browser. The victim's web browser executed the JavaScript payload and a request to load an image containing the victim cookie data and is made to the attacker's web server. The attacker has now in the victim session identifier, allowing the attacker to perform the session hijacking. So how to prevent a cross-site scripting situation in persistent XSS? So the scripting attacks can seriously damage your site and your visitors. Because of that, you should put it in an appropriate effort to prevent it from being possible on your content. You might also be vulnerable or not even know about it if you don't prevent these types of things. So there are the 3 types of things we will talk about prevention. So first is sanitize data. So data entry on popular website needs to be properly sanitized to prevent the improper inputs that might lead to the cross-site scripting. Developers should read the documentation and how WordPress deals with PHP filters, as the goal is to be able to automatically remove the undesirable character from input fields. Applying function calls the sanitized data is within the many WordPress common conventions. Data validation helps you make sure that your data and the data you receiving from the user matches what you need. Fortunately, there is a PHP function for that. This can be done through filler_var, which accept validation such as, for example, making sure that an email address is fully formatted as an email address. Further option can be read through within the PHP documentation. Using the escape exit is the way to prevent user submission data from including the HTML entities. As such, this can be done through PHP functions such as noHTML. To further improve your hosting security against cross-site scripting, prefer to use a library like HTML purifier, as it is able to escape entire blocks of the HTML in a standard compliant way. So that's all for the persistent cross-site scripting attack and entry point attack, cookie theft and prevention.